Heading up the career service work on supporting postgraduates at the University of Manchester for some time now, and has developed extensive training programs and workshops for postgraduates, such as Pathways, an annual 3-day program for over 500 participants on career options for researchers. She has just developed and launched a new website on academic careers, open to all but with a particular emphasis on postgraduates and postdocs. And she loves working with technology, having introduced blogging to the careers service 3 years ago. And she writes a very well-known and established and very well-respected blog on postgraduate careers. She has 3 Twitter accounts now and puts her annual postgraduate careers talks as audio podcasts with slides on SlideShare. But this is her very first webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth to start the presentation. Elizabeth.
Okay, Dan, thanks ever so much. And so welcome to the webinar. I'm Elizabeth Wilkinson, and I head up our postgraduate careers work at the University of Manchester. Absolutely delighted to be supporting LinkHigher in this new venture. Just to give you a bit of my background, prior to coming back to work at a university, I've been a software engineer, a graduate recruitment manager, an HR manager, and a manufacturing manager. What that means is I can give you my experience from both sides of the recruiting fence and give you an insight as to why employers ask you these awful things that they ask you. So the format for today is I'm going to present to you for about 20-25 minutes. You'll be able to see my slides as we go through, but I'll be saying a lot more than is actually on the slides. You can type in your questions at any point. If I spot a question I can quickly answer as we go through, I'll try and do that. But I think I'm probably more likely to go through the questions at the end. And I'll try and answer as many as I can in the time that we've got available. So, here goes. Was it worth it? Okay. Well, I want you to think about one particular question. What can you do now which you didn't know you could do before you started? I think if postgraduate study or postgraduate research is about anything, it's about pushing yourself. And there are probably many things that you maybe thought you might be able to do, but now you know for sure that you're able to do a whole range of things which are completely new to you. I think it's very important that you celebrate your achievements as a postgraduate. You're in a very critical environment, and it's very easy to forget that you're amongst the best of the best. You're amongst people who are similarly very, very smart, very intelligent, who've got a lot of things to offer. But you've got a lot of things to offer as well, so don't just dismiss what you've already done. Having said that, if you think about employers, future employers are unlikely to want you to write a thesis or to get a distinction in an exam, even if you stay in academia. So one of the really important things, if you think about employment, is to focus on the bigger picture. Now, just thinking, without knowing exactly what you're doing as a postgrad, I can already predict that if you're a researcher, one of your achievements is you played a massive part in pushing back the boundaries of knowledge. There are things that we know now that we didn't know before you came along. You've added to that whole fountain of knowledge throughout the world. And if you're a master's, if you can remember back to your final year undergraduate degree, well, the year that you're in now, you know, is twice as hard as that. So you're really going through a very intensive program. Now, all of you will have solved problems. All of you will have analyzed data or drawn conclusions from a wide range of information. You've probably all managed at least one project, and for those of you who are on PhDs, you'll have managed a really major long-term project with lots and lots of challenges that you've had to get through. I think one of the most important ones is that you can look at a massive information and you can focus in on what's important and communicate that back to other people. So you're the kind of people who can really see the wood for the trees and focus on what's critical out of all that information that's out there. And one which I know that employers really appreciate is that you can structure an argument and defend your position. Most importantly, using evidence rather than just opinion. Now, these are the kind of things which you maybe don't realize are the things which are going to be really, really important to you for the rest of your career. There was a survey last year about people 3 years on from a PhD and what they were doing, the kind of skills that they were using. And really not very many of them, even if they were researchers in higher education, were still using the detail that they'd gone through during their PhD. What they were continuing to use was broad discipline knowledge and the generic skills that they developed during their PhD. So those are the things which will stick with you. Okay, so that's what you've got to work on. Let's talk about the other side of the argument, the employers. I'll start out just mentioning academic employers. We know that times are tough in academia, particularly if you're in the humanities. And if you want to try and get on in academic employment, then you really need to set yourself apart. And having spoken to lots of academic researchers, lots of academics in the last couple of years, I've started to come to the conclusion you really have to live and breathe your research if you want to make it. You have to be prepared to do whatever it takes to be able to set yourself apart from the competition. You may have to move universities, you may have to move to another part of the country or to another continent. I actually know people, academics, who, as they were developing their academic career, commuted from Devon to Manchester. These things sound extreme, but if the competition is prepared to do it, you might have to also be prepared to do it. Now, I'm assuming that you're actually on this LinkHigher site because you're probably already thinking about, should I move out of academia? So I'm going to focus on non-academic employers for most of the rest of the presentation, but I'm very happy to answer any questions on academic careers if you've got those. And I've put up there our new website, An Academic Career, which is www.manchester.ac.uk/academic career, which has masses of information for undergraduates, for postgraduates and for postdocs, all in separate areas, about how do you get into an academic career and are you going to make it. Okay, let's focus on the other types of employers, all those non-academic employers then. Now, one of the issues you've got with non-academic employers is that for a lot of those employers, you come with quite a bit of baggage as a postgraduate. Now, some of this is very out of date. It's just kind of the mythology of postgrads. You know, these are the employers who watched Brideshead Revisited a long time ago, and they read the Daily Mail, and somehow they think you're a pointy-headed boffin, or you spend all your time drinking sherry in the common room. That's so outdated. But there are people out there who think that this populist view of academia is still there. You need to be able to convince them it's nothing like that, that academia at the moment is very much more pressured and that you can live in the real world, as people like to call it. However, there are some bits of baggage which are a bit uncomfortably close to the truth. Dan did some research with employers last year, which was very interesting, and he did get a comment that one employer in particular said that postgrads were people who couldn't get a job, so they went to do postgraduate study. And when he mentioned this to a group of a presentation in front of PhDs, there was an audible intake of breath as they were shocked that they might be categorized as people who couldn't actually get a job as an undergraduate. However, as a careers advisor, I've lost count of the number of times I've heard undergrads tell me, well, I'm not ready for a job yet, so I'm going to do a postgrad instead. So that one actually may be the truth for some people. Now, if it's not you, you've got to be able to argue against that stereotype. I think as long as you think about the stereotypes, the anti-postgraduate stereotypes, which some employers might be bringing into play, and show that they don't apply to you, bust through those myths, then you've got more of a chance of being taken seriously as a postgraduate. Another common reaction for non-academic employers is, well, I'm quite happy to look at postgrads, but postgrads, undergrads, what's the difference? One of them's older than the other one. And that's very common for a lot of good employers who do actually recruit postgrads, but they want to see what's the added value. They don't just want to take you as something better than an undergrad simply because you've got a different degree. You're going to have to convince them. One really good thing, though, is another research survey which came out about 3 or 4 years ago, looked particularly at PhD employers. And what they did find was that even in employers who didn't normally target postgrads, once they'd tried a postgrad, they loved that. They said, I want more of those. So once you get into the workplace, it's quite easy to be able to impress people with all those other skills that we talked about, all the different achievements that you've got. They really are valued. So it's getting your foot in the door which is important. So let's think about the perceptions of employers and why they should want a postgrad. Okay. So this is another report which came out from the Council of Industry and Higher Education. And they spoke to about 100 senior managers, mainly in large organisations, large private sector organisations, a lot of whom recruited masters and PhDs, but particularly for technical subjects. So there were quite a lot of technical employees in there. And they asked them what they did and they didn't rate about postgraduates. Okay, first lot. Over 80% of them mentioned that they loved the analytical skills, the specialist knowledge, the research and technical skills. Those are the things that they were looking for in postgraduates, really liked those and appreciated those. So those were kind of taken as read. By having a PhD in physics or engineering, they assumed that you were pretty good on the technical side. Another area that they liked was the fact that you came up with new ideas and you had a real ability to innovate. And that's great, because if you've learnt anything within a postgraduate degree, it's about how to create new knowledge. And that's really important in the workplace today. So that's something that you can promote very strongly. Now the areas where they were not so keen were they didn't necessarily think that just because you got a master's or a PhD that necessarily meant that you were mature. And this may go back to all those undergrads who say, well, I'll do a postgrad because I'm not ready for work yet. And they actually come out at the end of a postgraduate degree not really much further on than a good undergraduate. So you need to think about how you can overcome that possible perception. And I think the one which is really useful for you to know is that they really weren't convinced about having a postgrad in front of them meant that they were going to have a guarantee of a high caliber candidate, or that you had leadership potential. Now just to digest that, it doesn't mean to say that you're not a high caliber candidate. It doesn't mean to say that you don't have leadership potential. But they don't take it as read just because they see Masters or PhD on your CV. You have to work to prove that to them. So now that you know, you'll know what to put on your CV to try to convince them that you've got real high quality and that you have the potential to lead. Another source of information that we got only in the last 3 weeks or so, Carl Gilliard, who leads the Association of Graduate Recruiters, came to an employability seminar that we ran at the University of Manchester. And there was an audience of academics. We managed to get academics to listen to Carl's views. And he represents mainly large, well-known employers, so it's the big graduate recruiters of this world. One of the academics asked about what was the value of a master's to employers. And Carl's a pretty straightforward, straight-talking guy. And he said, well, actually, lots of his members were slightly biased against postgraduate programs. Cue another audible gasp from the audience. But he was quite specific about why they might be biased against postgrad programs. And as we said, it was because they were disappointed with their ability to articulate the added value that their postgraduate program gave. Knowing that, it means that it's something that you can fix. So let's talk about articulating the benefit.